Fishermen, residents, environmental groups and human rights organizations are up in arms after Shell started 3D seismic surveys between Morgan's Bay and Port St. John's in the Eastern Cape. The oil giant is hunting for reserves off the remote wild coast by blasting sound waves into the sea with air guns every 10 seconds. It will last for the next 4 to 5 months. And of course, it's raising a lot of concerns about the well-being of marine life. We're now joined by human rights lawyer and social activist Pooven Moodley and South Durban Community Environmental Alliance Coordinator Desmond D'Sa. Good evening to both of you, and thank you for your time. I just want to talk about what we have seen this week. There was, of course, a court bid to try and stop part of the work that Shell wanted to undertake from this week. Perhaps, Pooven, let me come to you. What was the outcome of that process? Has it been concluded yet?
Thanks, Kathy. So we went to court. Natural Justice, Greenpeace Africa, and 2 other organizations were in court yesterday, arguing why the seismic surveys should not start. The judgment will be handed down on Friday at 9 a.m. But essentially, we went to court on a very urgent basis because there has not been proper consultation with interested and affected parties. But also we think that this is unlawful because the proper environmental authorizations have not been done.
As far as we know, has Shell gone ahead to begin this work without that court judgment, or have you been able to at least delay it post what the court will say?
Based on the information we've got is that the seismic surveys have not started, and our understanding is that Shell will wait for the outcome of the judgment on Friday morning.
Desmond, let me come to you and perhaps talk a little bit about the concerns that the community really has about the environmental impact that this work, this exploration is likely to have.
Well, it's going to have a devastating impact on not only on the marine life, but also on people. And we know that the vast majority of people in this country love the ocean, love going to visit the ocean, love to have recreation on the ocean. But more importantly, there's over 25,000 people who are fishing in the ocean for a livelihood. And this will have a huge impact on our marine resources. We know that when they did try and do seismic testing in the past, in particular ExxonMobil, the dolphins and the whales were washing up in Durban, including a number of lionfish. And we know that this is a pathway for the sardine run. This is a pathway for the whales. This is a pathway for all the dolphins and all the fish that come up from the South Antarctic, but also through from the Western Cape, the Eastern Cape, and then into KZN and beyond. So this will have an impact on food security, and it will affect people who use the ocean, especially traditional healers who use the ocean to heal themselves and take away the salt water, because it is a healing mechanism for them. Recreation and surfers are really up in arms. So we got the whole country up in arms, as never before seen, that the whole country can come together and really say to Shell, we do not want that happening on our shoreline. We have the most beautiful beaches. We have all the resources. And your exploration is going to not only destroy, but if there's a spillage, especially in the areas where they want to go and explore and go and do the seismic testing, we know for certain that if there's an incident, that will be devastating. All our beaches will be ruined. We can kiss goodbye to the tourism industry, because that's the lifeblood of South Africa at the current moment. And Shell is not interested in that. They're not going to create much jobs. We know through all the paperwork that we've gone through, there's very minimum jobs. But what we see is that the big corporations, once again, like they've done in other parts of the continent, where they've been devastating and destroying the waters, destroying the commons, destroying the soil, we are seeing that attitude coming through here, and despite the governments of their own countries saying no to oil and gas exploration, Shell has defined their own country governments, and they define the people of South Africa. So we've done the right thing to go to court, but this is only the beginning of a huge campaign that we started in the last 3 weeks, all over the coastline, all over the country, where we are calling on our people not to fill up at the Shell garage, but more critically is to say that we won't allow Shell to get away with this.
Pooven, it's one thing, you know, to accuse Shell of not prescribing perhaps to some of the environmental impact studies, the licenses that they need to be doing this work. But we are not, you know, we are a sovereign state. What is our government saying about this? Who is to be held accountable or responsible for what we're seeing happen right now?
Yeah, Kathy, that's a really good point. And the bottom line is, you know, it's our government who's meant to be ensuring the protection, you know, of the country, to ensure the well-being, you know, of people living in this country. But what we see in South Africa, like we see in many other countries, is that, you know, money has a big influence. You know, if you look at the recent Glasgow climate conference, there were over 500 oil and gas representatives in a climate negotiation. And, you know, as the agreement was made, it was clear that companies and governments are not willing, even though, you know, they talk about getting to a net zero, you know, and switching to renewable energy. With these types of projects, you know, like the one at Shell, there's many other approvals that have been given. And at the moment, we're also in court trying to stop the East Africa oil pipeline with Total, which would be the longest pipeline. But just to give you an indication that, you know, governments seem to be really working more for companies than for the people.
That of course, is quite disappointing, because we saw off the back of the COP26 meeting, our own Environmental Affairs and Fisheries Minister, Barbara Creecy, really speaking about South Africa's commitment to having a much more carbon cleaner, running a much more carbon clean economy, and of course adhering to some of its commitments. Are you saying that that is in fact not the case? Because despite what government is saying on the one end, some of the work that is taking place is being approved by the same government.
No, absolutely. I think, you know, on the one hand, there's obviously a lot of pressure on government to move to renewables, and there is a slow movement in terms of some kind of energy transition. But, you know, often the words are very hollow, as in, you know, one can judge government by the actions. And if you look at what's happening to South Africa, you've got all of these oil and gas licenses. You've got on the beaches, you know, mining being granted permission on the West Coast, for example. The Amadiba community had been resisting it, you know, for the last 10 years because, you know, both the Australian company backed by the government want the mining to continue. And if you look at the extraction of the whole of South Africa, our history is based on extraction. And ultimately, you know, people are not benefiting. South Africa is the most unequal country. As Desmond said, you know, it's very extractive. Jobs would be provided for mainly people from outside South Africa, but also all of the profits end up in the hands of multinational companies. And in May this year, you know, based on the climate crisis, people in Netherlands took Shell to court, and they won a case, and the court ordered Shell to reduce their emissions by 45% by 2030. So it's hard to understand how you know, the South African government is giving this permission, and this permission was given in 2014. A lot of things have changed since then, as we see in the climate crisis today.
Desmond, let me end off with you and perhaps talk about then the public aspect of this campaign. How far are you going to be taking it?
Well, Kathy, let me just say that there's a huge campaign, and it's all along the coastline. It's inland. People are coming out in their numbers. And on the 5th of December, Sunday, is a huge march on the Wild Coast, because this is our most treasure. This is the biggest treasure we ever got. We've got nothing else. We have to look after this treasure, and we can't allow people to destroy it. So people are coming out in their numbers. We are going to be on the Wild Coast on Sunday from 10 o'clock, but all on the coast, inland including. people are coming out in the numbers to say we love our beach, we love our water, we love our fish, we love our recreation, we don't want any destruction to take place. And Shell can only, if they don't do what's right, I can only say this, Kathy, is that the people of South Africa are going to take it in their hands and they're going to boycott Shell. They're going to not service themselves. Some of the garage owners have already come out and are no longer using Shell to fill up their pump at their pump station. So I think that's only the beginning of what is there to come. But it's also going to go through continental and internationally. Huge support against Shell for the people of this country to stand up and say no to Shell going into our oceans and destroying our commons.
Desmond D'Sa is with the South Durban Community Environmental Alliance, and Pooven Moodley is a social justice activist. Thank you both for your time tonight on that.